I'm Denise Noble with the HR engineers, and I'll start with our slideshow here and be available for questions after that or at the end of all the presentations. So we've all seen the signs. It can get pretty daunting out there with the number of people that are hiring. You can't go a mile down the street without seeing at least a dozen signs out for people. So we want to give you some edges to getting really good people and being able to keep them. And this is my information. And what I have for you today are 5 secrets to hiring and keeping good employees. The first and most important thing is to really know what your needs are, to figure out just what it is that you need someone to do for you. And, you know, figuring out how many hours the person will work and what it's going to cost you, and will the new hire increase your revenue. So we have a form that helps you figure some of this out, looks at how you're spending your time, what you like to do best, and kind of focusing you on those elements. All right. Next is to have a clear job description, and you want to really hone that down. It can really help when you're evaluating the performance of people, and you don't want to make assumptions. And one of the things I advise is that you also on your job description include the following or a similar phrase: nothing in the job description restricts management's right to assign or reassign duties and responsibilities to this job at any time. And this gives you the necessary latitude to request additional or alternate duties from time to time. And it also gives you the ability to completely revise the job description or change the employer's work assignment as needed. Then the next thing that I'm really recommending, particularly in this new work environment, is an easy application and screening process. You know, spending over 45 minutes to apply for a job makes people want to pull their hair out. And reading through dozens of applications that don't match your job can be very off-putting. So what we're looking at is, don't make people re-enter the same information over and over again. And then on your end, have qualifying questions. A lot of the job posting websites let you do that, and it really can help screen your candidates. Yes, they can lie, but mostly they don't. And it cuts out a lot of the extra applications. And then next is to ask really great interview questions. You want to really get a sense of what the candidate can do for the job. And past performance is the best predictor of future success. So do ask open-ended questions where the person is telling you about past experiences, what skills they've used in their past jobs, how they've handled certain problems. And they said, don't ask the esoteric nonsense questions. And what I mean by that is, something similar to, would you rather be a butterfly or a hummingbird? Okay. It was very fashionable to ask these questions that were supposed to have big insights into the psychology of the person. And, it really doesn't do anything other than make you look very snobbish and not very welcoming. And
Denise,
of course,
Denise, can I ask you a quick question? You
Sure.
mentioned discriminatory or illegal questions.
Yep.
Are those oftentimes related to age and also previous income?
Yes, thanks, Steve. That is a new prohibition in Massachusetts right now in what's called fair compensation. You are no longer able to ask what a person has made in their former jobs. And besides all the, questions about age, you can't ask, do you have a car? You need to ask, can you get to work, dependably? And so we actually have a sheet of those questions and what you can and can't ask that can be available for people that if they're interested. So that is a big thing. What they liked and disliked about their former jobs and why. That can give you a lot of insight into the person. And again, you don't want to hire someone that is just like you, which is a very common fault. You like somebody because they're just like you, but you're hiring to do a job that you really don't want to do. It doesn't click, okay? So one of my early mentors had this idea of you taking on the persona of the job and evaluating from that perspective, making believe you are the job and finding, and filling those needs rather than who you like. And finally, we have some low cost, high impact benefits. And believe it or not, money is not the number one job benefit considered by most employees. It's actually only number one for salespeople. It's a different mentality, okay? People really want to feel respected. They want to feel that they're part of the team. They want to feel that they're making a difference. Flex time, of course, is a big thing. Recognition, opportunities to grow and learn, good bosses are extremely important. Okay. When you appoint someone a manager, you want to make sure that they really like people. You don't always put the person that has the longest time in the job in as a manager, and get your managers some good training. Make sure they have excellent people skills. We find that people do not quit jobs, they quit bosses. And so that's a big consideration. And on the perks and awards, this is a short list of some of the things that we advise that you could get that don't cost you much, but have a big bang for your buck. And free food is always a winner. All right. And one of the other things in paid benefits is group term life insurance, and it's relatively inexpensive to purchase. However, when you insure an employee for, say, $50,000, they internalize a benefit of $50,000 rather than the cost of the premium. And then you've got employee paid programs, think AFLAC. There's a lot of policies out there that give good discounts to the employees, and they pay them out of their pocket. All right, so again, the 5 secrets are crystallizing your labor needs, have a clear job description, easy application and screening, ask great interview questions, low cost, high impact benefits.
That's great. Denise, can I break in here? There's a question about asking about vaccination status to candidates. Is that legal? And what are your thoughts on it?
Yes, that is, a very hot topic right now. And what seems to be happening, I'm going to end the slideshow here. So, okay. So what seems to be the prevalent legal opinion is that you have a duty to make sure that your employees and your customers are safe. So you can require vaccinations for people that have contact with other people. If somebody's going to be working from home, it's not your business whether they've been vaccinated. But if they're interacting with your customers or with other staff people, yes, you can ask for proof of vaccination.
Okay, great. Any other questions before we move on to Dave Sawyer and the discussion of background checks and how to identify great employees and how to potentially even give them additional consideration if background checks reveal something from their past? Okay, so Dave Sawyer, Safer Places, you're up. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Steve and Joe, for having me today. Nice to share the screen with Denise and Brad. Haven't done that yet, so this is a new experience for me. And I guess I also want to start with thanking our sponsors for making all this possible today. So I want to, I guess, make 2 primary points here. One is it's not a good time to eliminate your background check and your drug test. You might think so, but we'll discuss some reasons why. But it is a good time to make sure that your background check is FCRA compliant, that you're not just doing the cheapest and the fastest. And I think a big one, and Denise alluded to this, is consider the applicant experience. If the background check is a cumbersome experience for them, that's off-putting. It's not a good way to start off on the right foot with a new employee. So that's a big consideration, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Make sound hiring decisions as a result of the background check. Don't have a bright line policy that says, okay, you had a misdemeanor conviction 3 years ago, you're in the no-go pile, and just automatically out. We'll talk a little bit about individualized assessments, which is a good way to help make a good hiring decision. Social media, the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to using that as part of your screening. And of course, drug testing in the age of legalized marijuana is another big, and I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my screen jumping around here, but we'll do the best I can with that. So I've listed some things on the screen here that are typical as part of a background check. And the point I want to make here is there's no such thing as a standard background check. We get calls frequently from people that say, yeah, just give me the standard, I don't need anything special or whatever. And it really, you want to match the background check to the position for which you're hiring. You also don't want to have things in there that will help slow it down. So if you're doing like an instant background check, that's probably not legal for employment purposes, and it's probably definitely not accurate and complete. Background checks don't have to take a lot of time. They can take 2-3 days, but depending what goes in them, sometimes we can turn them around to 24 hours. But those instant online searches, that's where you want to be wary. An example of something that I think people, not so much now, but they used to just automatically throw in there was the credit report. And if you think about it, what results on a credit report are you going to see that might cause you not to hire? So, don't have extraneous things in there that you really don't need as part of the background screening process. If it's a financial position, if you're hiring someone to be your CFO, you might have a vested interest in knowing if he can handle his own finances. And there are some other pieces of information you find in a credit report, but for the most part, most of the time now, most positions, that's not really necessary anymore. So what we want to talk about on this screen here is staying away from that mentality. If you have a pulse, you're hired. So I think employers are concerned, like, oh, well, but if this takes too long, they're going to move on. I got to make a decision like right now, or they're going to take the next offer that they get. And although I understand that impulse, you really need to resist that. And couple of things that you can do if you really think it's taking too long. And every once in a while, we run into something where a person, lived in some town in Texas a couple years ago. So we're doing a search for criminal records down there, and that court is backed up, and so it's taking too long. And you can make a contingent offer to the person. They know what their background is. So if you say to them, look, I'm making you a contingent offer, you're hired as long as your background check comes back satisfactory. So that's some comfort to them, I think, even though it's not back yet. They know that, if they have a criminal record or not. So they know if they're going to get the job at that point. So that's one thing you can do. You can, you have to be careful of local laws here, but you can screen the top 2 or 3 candidates. So if your first one doesn't work out, you can immediately move on, to the second one. You do have to be careful there. Some locations do say that you must make a contingent offer before you can even do the background check. So do check local laws on that. But those are a couple of things that you can do to kind of mitigate searches that might be, you think are taking a little bit too long and you're nervous about the person moving on and maybe taking something else. I put in social media searches in here because within the last year or two, that's probably the biggest change that we've seen in background screening is the addition of social media. Employers have been doing it, for a while now, and statistics show 70% of employers are doing it, and up to half and more in some surveys that I've seen say that what they found in the social media search that they've done have caused them not to hire. So should you be doing it yourself? Well, the screen's kind of a clue to my answer to that. Don't even think about it. And Why? Well, one reason is it's time consuming. I mean, it takes a long time to go through all the different social media outlets that you might want to be searching. And it's very difficult to be consistent, which of course is important in any hiring practice, is to apply your policies consistently. But here's probably the biggest reason. You'll see things that you cannot consider legally when you're making a hiring decision. And then how do you prove that that was not part of your hiring decision? You've seen it, you can't unsee it. So things like religious affiliation, sexual orientation, even somebody that's going through chemotherapy that may be sick, or just found out that there's going to be an addition to their family. These are things that you should not be considering when you're making a hiring decision. And if you're doing a social media search on your own, you're not going to be able to unsee these, and it's going to be very difficult to prove that that was not part of your thinking when you made your hiring decision. So a professional company that does social media searches as part of the background screening process will let you set filters. What type of things do you consider actionable that would cause you potentially not to hire? Somebody using hate speech or online bullying. And I've got a couple of examples of things that we found online. You can use keywords. Keyword could be your company name. Has the person been online bad-mouthing your company, or maybe their current employer? They've been bad-mouthing or talking poorly about their boss or something. So these are all things that would be actionable, and a professional company would help you to do this quickly, which is important in this day and age of competition in hiring, to get the results quickly, to get it be consistent, and only see what is actionable and have everything else redacted from the report so that you never see that. Another thing that I want to mention is the individualized assessment. This is a huge benefit, I think, especially in this environment when it's difficult to hire people. So if you are of the mindset, well, this person's got a felony on their record, and so I'm not going to hire them, without knowing the rest of the story, there might be a backstory to this that would cause you to change your mind. So I don't know how many of us on the call are old enough to remember Paul Harvey, but he used to tell these interesting stories on the radio, and he'd end with the phrase, "And now you know the rest of the story." Well, that's kind of what the individualized assessment is. And it's required in California. In other parts of the country, it's a recommendation by the EEOC, Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And it really allows you to see beyond what just is in black and white on a criminal record report that may come back on the background screening report. So you'll find it's really an interview, like a second interview. So something came back on the criminal record report. Now you're interviewing. You can do these yourself. Background screening companies, some of them will do them for you. We offer them, and we do a telephone interview. So we're confirming the accuracy. How long ago? How old were you at the time that this happened? And then we're focusing on rehabilitation efforts. What have you done to rehabilitate yourself? Maybe you've had additional education. Maybe your crime was assault and battery, and you have attended anger management classes. Maybe you've been to Alcoholics Anonymous, and you can show 10 years of sobriety. So rehabilitation efforts that's an important factor. Have you had a position after you were convicted that is similar to the one that you're applying for now? And were you successful in that position? So these are all good things for an employer to know that kind of go beyond what was just on that background check report showing a criminal conviction. It kind of tells you the rest of the story. And other things like the length and consistency of employment history, all these things would go into that and be part of your decision-making process, kind of like that last piece of the puzzle. And the really good news here is that oftentimes, and I've seen this many times with our clients, something that kind of jumped off the page at them and saying, "Oh boy, I don't know if we can hire that person," All of a sudden, they get the rest of the story to see that the person has rehabilitated themselves, and now they're saying, you know what, maybe this guy's well qualified. Maybe I should be hiring this person. And we can't afford to be putting aside people that are well qualified, just on the face of a report. Sometimes you do need to dig a little bit deeper. And I'll just cover this quickly, but Denise mentioned it, the applicant experience. First thing is make sure that you're legally compliant. Don't be asking for things like, if you're doing the social media searches on your own, most states have passed laws that say you can't ask for a password. You can't ask the applicant to friend you on Facebook, for example. When we do the searches, it's publicly facing information only. Don't ask too early about past criminal behavior. The ban the box movement, don't have time to really go into all of that, but there are laws that say you can't put that on your application in most states. Massachusetts is one of them. You can't ask, have you ever been convicted that early on in the process? Can't ask about salary history in a lot of states. So that's certainly, if you're doing things like that, could get you in trouble legally. It's also going to be off-putting to your applicant. And then streamline the process as best you can. Applicant tracking systems are great for that. Electronic signatures where legally permitted. And if the process does take a little bit too long and you're nervous that they might be moving on, keep them informed. Give them a call and let them know what's going on. That's always, I think, a good practice. And I'll end with this topic, drug testing. What about marijuana? That's a hot topic in the age of legalized marijuana. And it doesn't change the classification in Massachusetts anyway it's still a Schedule I drug at the federal level. In most states that have passed laws that have legalized even the recreational use of marijuana, have also put into that law that employers do not have to accept the use of marijuana on the job. They don't have to allow possession of it in the workplace, certainly not the sale of it. And you certainly do not have to tolerate somebody that comes to work under the influence of any drug, but including marijuana. So what we, and this shows the states where it's just, with this medical marijuana, the green states, blue also includes recreational marijuana. And the main point I want to make here, though, is that poor job performance is always actionable, regardless of the reason for that. If it's being under the influence, I recommend, giving some extra training to your supervisors to spot signs of being under the influence. We don't yet have a test that, like we do for alcohol, that's readily available to show impairment. So a lot of employers have said, you know what, can you take marijuana out of of my drug test? I'm going to keep drug testing, but take marijuana out because, if I don't hire people that test positive for marijuana, I can't hire anybody. And it has gotten to that point in a lot of industries. So, so I don't necessarily think that's a bad idea to take marijuana out of the equation. But you certainly don't want people showing up to work under the influence of marijuana. So while we don't have a test there's one available, it's not readily available, I'll say it that way, that shows impairment of marijuana. Train your staff to recognize the signs of that. People that come in late all the time, people that are absent a lot in whether it's marijuana or some other reason, that's still actionable. That's still poor job performance. So don't just think you have to allow all the effects of marijuana, even if you decide not to test for it. So I don't know if we have any questions yet, or if we want to have some at the end, but that's it for my section.
And Dave, quick question. When you're asking a candidate if they are open to having a background check, how do you even broach that? How do you suggest that you broach that subject?
Well, I think it's pretty common these days, so I don't think that's an issue. I think people expect a background check. There are legal requirements. There are actually at the federal level 2 forms that have to be signed: an authorization form and also a disclosure when you're doing a background check for employment purposes. That kicks in some very specific requirements. If you're using the Corey system in Massachusetts, that's another form that has to be signed. Your background screening company should help you make sure you're legally compliant. But yeah, I don't think it's an issue, Steve, to bring it up. I think people expect it.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're gonna move on to Brad Pinta, and Brad does some employment law as well as business law. And what he's going to talk about today really is the irony of hiring and firing his own staff, and sort of the legal tightrope he walked to avoid problems within his office and legally. And Brad, I'll let you tell your story.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Good morning, everyone. Really good to work with David and Denise on this. It was a fun project to put together on this a little bit. My name is Brad Pinta. I own a company called Pinta Law Group. We're over in Quincy. I've been practicing law for 40 years, and my background's a trial lawyer, and that kind of dictates how I handle a lot of cases because I can see how they're going to play out. But the problem today is as a small business owner, how do you handle the stuff that's going on? And you've got to approach it with a little bit of creativity. My gig is always call me. If you're a business owner, call me and let me run this by me. But the calls I've been getting the last few weeks, or actually months now, are what do I do about this employee? How do I handle this employee? What do I do? And I'm usually trying to coach someone out of a dramatic law litigation type mode. How do I get things resolved? And the tip I'm going to give you on for all of these great points that all these folks have been giving you is just keep really good records, because I can never win a case for you if you don't have any records. But this morning, I want to talk to you not as a business lawyer about how to litigate cases. I want to talk about what do you do with your employees? I want to talk to you about as a business owner. I run a small law firm. I've got 5 employees. I've been running this law firm, different names and so forth for the past, like I say, 40 years. And the challenge for me isn't practicing law, or isn't going to court and trying the cases or winning the cases or giving advice. The challenge for me in the last 2 years has been keeping my staff and being able to churn out the work. It's been a real problem. And so I want to talk to you this morning as a business owner. What do you do? How do you approach this? How do you think about this? Because the thought process now is totally different than it was, I'm going to say, a year ago. Some of the clients that I represent, restaurants, for example, they can't get their people to come to work. They can't find people to work for them. So what do you do? How do you get them there? So there's 2 ways to think about this. The first thing I think you have to digest is you've got existing employees. And then the other stream, of course, is you got new employees. How do you attract them? So let me give you sort of an example of, because I have the same debate. I'm going to give you an example in both sets of situations, how I had to handle this as a business lawyer, knowing what my perils were if I screwed it up. So the first thing is I've always had what's called a shared a position, where I have one secretary works 3 days, the other works 2 days. Sometimes it's 3 and 3, sometimes they switch them, but it's a shared position. So because it's a shared position, they share the benefits. And I have it all written up in a manual and everyone signs off. So there's really no confusion on that. But here's the problem. One person has been with me for 16 years, loyal employee, honest as the day. She's 72 years old and has diabetes. She can't come back to work. She can't come back to my building. It's a problem. So what do you do as a business owner? Forget about a lawyer. What do you do as a business owner? You got to capitalize on that. That's a wonderful situation to have someone who's loyal to you to a fault, who wants to continue to work and probably can't get a job anywhere else. What do? I got creative, and that's the key word here. I sat down with her and I said, well, I didn't sit down with her because we couldn't go face to face. I called her up and I said, look, you can't be the office manager anymore. So you got to take a cut and pay. Now, obviously, if there was a millennium on the other side of that conversation, the conversation would have ended at that point. But what did she say? She said, okay, what are you thinking? I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you work at home 2 days a week. I'm going to buy you a computer, a printer, whatever else you need. We're going to get it all established in your dining room. You are now going to be my billing administrator. I gave her a new title, a new position, a new salary. And what's the word I get back from her? Thank you. When does an employer ever hear that? Thank you. To me, I must have hit a home run with that one. And then what happened afterwards, within a few months later, in the middle of this pandemic, I ran into problems with the other employee who left suddenly. And now I had a situation where this lady stepped in and without even screaming or complaining, stepped in and covered a lot of the stuff that had to be done. Again, my thank yous to her, and she's going to get a hefty bonus at the end of this year. But that was a well-handled situation, I think. Now I go to the other person and the other situation, which is the bad situation. This person was a younger female, a little bit arrogant, a little bit entitled, a little bit hard to deal with, not getting along with the rest of the staff. What do? Do you fire her? I was having staff meetings every week. I was doing everything I could to keep her on board because I didn't want to lose her, and I didn't want to have to go through the trauma and the headache that I've had to go through the last 4 weeks trying to replace her. So what happened is that one night I said to her, I need you to come back tomorrow with a better attitude. I don't like your attitude. How offensive is that? The boss says to her, you got to change your attitude. That's really not too offensive, right? She walked from the door right up to my face. It's a total of 16 feet because I measured it for the testimony. She walked up to me and said, you're in my face. Get out of my face. What could I do now? Now I got a problem employee in front of me. If I fire her, you know what's going to happen? I'm going to wind up in Quincy District Court tomorrow on an assault charge that didn't occur. So what did I do? I stepped back, being a smart guy, because I've been doing this litigation gig for 40 years. I stepped back and said, let's have a staff meeting tomorrow. I try to quiet the problem. I knew I was going to fire her tomorrow, but when I fired her in front of other people. And I fired her for cause, and I fired her because of her arrogance and because of her obstinance, and I had witnesses. So then when she applied for unemployment, I get that mean streak in me. I objected to it and won the unemployment hearing because she was fired for cause. But my point of that story is that I had two employees. One was a problem and could have escalated into a disaster. And the other I turned into a wonderful situation where she's still working for me. I think we're going on 17 years this winter. That's a situation. What's the rule here? You got to get creative. You got to look at your operation. Now, I have since replaced the problem employee. I went through three other people to replace it. I hired one person, and I didn't do a good background check like David was talking about. I was desperate. I hired someone. I didn't want to pay the commission fee to an agency, so I did the screening myself. Wasn't good enough. She was here for 3 days. I had to fire her. That was a disaster. Then I brought in someone else. Same problem. I knew she was a problem when she put the word boss lady on her desk sign. That didn't last too long. But that was number two. Then the third person, I did go through an employment agency. I was desperate. Cost me a lot of money, but she's a wonderful person, and I'm probably going to convert her, after a couple of weeks to a full-time employee. And my answer to that is I don't really care what the cost is, because I need that, and it makes my staff better and makes my operation better. So what I'm talking about here today is not my lessons as a lawyer. It's more about my lessons as a business owner. You're all in the same boat I am. This pandemic has pushed us to the brink. You have to get creative. A lot of things I'd love to do. I wish I could ask some of the questions and do some of the interviews I could do 4 or 5 years ago, but you can't. You can't right now. And you've got to look, it's the bottom line. I said to someone, what do you, because I gave this talk the other day at another networking group, and I said, what'd you get out of this? He says, it's going to cost us more money to keep our employees or attract other employees. I said, that's the bottom line. But what choice do you have? If you've got the business to churn out, you don't have a choice. You have to pay more. You have to do what you have to do to keep these people happy. I love some of the stuff that Denise was talking about in terms of, what do you do to what are people looking for? They're looking for more than just a paycheck. They're looking for, easy hours. They're looking for remote. What I did is I bought remote computers for everybody. So if it is a snowy day, they can work at home. You've got to get creative to make your job position much better, much more attractive than it was a few years ago. In one of my other networking groups, we went around the room, and some of the folks there were pretty high-end lawyers and some pretty big firms. And the query was, what are you doing differently now than you did, let's say, 3 years ago? And they said, oh, we're so flexible now. If someone has kids, you can come in 3 days late. You can leave early if it's a snow day, if your kid has a ball game. One person said, hey, every Wednesday a week, we have wine afternoon. We're bringing wine, we sit around. Employees are doing things creatively to make their environment better for their employees. And I think you have to put your thinking cap on and think about that a little bit. I had to go back and rethink how I do things. I'm certainly not an old dog, but I've been doing this for a long time. But some of the things I'm doing now were unheard of 5 years ago. But that's what you got to do. You want to keep your existing employees, and you want to be creative and very attractive to get other employees. Try to stay out of trouble, and if you get into trouble, you know where to call. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And thank you, Brad. And your phrase that you encourage people to call you with is?
I love it when someone calls me and says, "Let me run this by you."
Right. And that's a complimentary consultation.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And it could lead to something, a solution for them, and not, it could be anywhere from billable to non-billable, depending on.
I can usually point
complexity.
someone in the right direction in 5 minutes. If it's going to escalate bigger. If I need more help, if I need some background, I'd call David. If I need somebody to come in and sort of dig into it, I'd use Denise. But it just enables me to sort of get on track what we're going to do. And that's really, as a business person, that's what you want to do. You just want to get on track. What do you want to do correctly? You don't want to go down the wrong path. I urge you people to call me. I get 3 to 5 calls a day. What do I do next? And at least I can keep you on track. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you, Brad. And Denise, quick question for you. One of the things I see in the news is people, employers are encouraged to do not only exit interviews, but retention interviews. So you're here, you're not leaving, we hope. What do you like about this place? What don't you like? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we do both, and employee satisfaction survey is another name for a survey done while someone is still employed. Particularly in small businesses, the employer should not be the one doing it. They need to have someone come in from the outside. They can be the paper survey questions, but if you've only got a small population, the answers to the questions are going to tell you who the person is, and that's not always good. You're not going to get honest answers. The same with when they're exiting. So it's always good to have someone else do it, unless you're a huge company and you can have an automated system that kind of goes in and the information comes back generically. When we go in, we usually have people fill out a paper survey, and then we sit with them for 10-15 minutes and ask some questions, pull out some details, and give the information back to the employer in a way that generalizes what we hear rather than specifics. If an employee is a problem, and there's red flags going up when we talk to them, we will tell the employer that. But otherwise, if somebody's just generally dissatisfied about something, we generalize the feedback and give it to them. One other thing, if I can, that I realize we've kind of been all around the edge of, all three of us, but haven't been specific about, is talking to people's references. Brad mentioned that he did a quick hire and didn't really spend that much time. That happens so much. It's really important to talk to the references, particularly former employers, if you can get them. Sometimes peers are good also, but you want to ask really specific questions, not take, oh yeah, that's a great guy, he walks on water. You want to get some examples similar to the interview questions that you would ask the person. And we also have a form available for that when you're calling. But and even using employment companies, I've found that sometimes they don't do the best at checking references. And I try and tell people, you're paying $2,500, $5,000, $10,000 to the company for this employee, take an extra half hour and double check the references yourself.
Let me just add to that, and I'm going beyond what I was asked to do here today a little bit. In terms of trial work and my trial work, and even the case I had with the bad employee at the Department of Unemployment, it comes down to documents and dates and verifications. And I was careful. I was one careful guy watching what was going on here. I mean, I'm not stupid. I saw it. The handwriting was on the wall, and I started putting notices in the personnel file. I started keeping track of the dates. When I did the firing, I brought in my office manager, so she had a memo in the file. And so I doctored my file to the point that when I was arguing the case in front of the unemployment board, there was no question I was going to win. There was no question she was going to lose, because I had that thing covered. If you're an employer and you're watching your employees and you're on site, you know the problems when they're coming. So start to smell them and do something about it. I had a guy that I used to go skiing with all the time. He had a liquor store, and we were on a chairlift. He used to ski with me on Sundays. And we're on a chairlift, and I said, geez, that manager you got's lousy. He said, I'm going to fire him Monday. And I said, okay, before you fire him, what do you got for records? What do you mean? Do you have a personnel file? No. Did you track any of his non-performance standards? No. He had nothing. He had nothing. And I said to him, can't fire him today. We got to wait at least 6 months so I can doctor a file. So sure enough, 6 months later, I could at least stand there when I was, arguing whatever the hell it was, whatever agency I was in. So I said, here's why we fired him. We had a straight track record. What went on here? Got to do that. Got to do that. And now more important now than before, because some of the employees come for you and then they leave. They're in and out. It's like a revolving door. I know one of the people that I hired because I looked at their computer. While they were working for me, they were already searching for another job. And so I saw, so thank God I tracked it. And that's another really good point I can give you, which is beyond what we were talking about today. When you're going to fire somebody, have your IT people take a look at their computer. You'd be amazed what you'll find on that computer. I had one secretary I thought was working hard for me. She was buying cars and getting concert tickets during the business hours. Those computer and the logs will tell you a whole bunch of what's really going on. And then when they want to take you on, and I'm standing there in a courtroom representing you, it's a cakewalk, but I need the records. So do some homework beyond what's going on here, Matt, what we talked about now. Thanks.
Thanks, Brad. And David, one last question for you. I think that employers are feeling urgency to hire, and in some ways they want to overlook the blemishes and the bumps that people have experienced. But in your knowledge, what is the cost of training and then firing because people didn't hire well?
Yeah, I've seen statistics all over the board. It might be a better question for Denise, but I mean, it's extremely expensive, to hire someone and train them. Doing the thorough background check is minuscule in comparison. And you're right. I mean, people oftentimes will say, well, I guess I get it from both sides. I get some employers that see any little blemish on a background check and I can't hire that person. And then you get, especially in this environment, you get people a lot more willing to overlook things. You have to find, that line where you're comfortable. And if it involves a criminal record, I really think that individualized assessment is a must tool for it to be using. When we do the telephone interviews with the person to get that rest of the story, we have a form that we follow and document and send that to the client. If anybody wants to do the individualized assessments on their own, I'd be happy if they contact me. I'd be happy to send them the form we use, and they can, like I said, it's easy to do on your own. It's just a matter of finding the time. And some people find it a little uncomfortable. If the record is especially something like a sex offense or something like that, they get uncomfortable talking about it. And that's another reason why they'll have, a professional screening company do it for them. But you can do it yourself. And I'm happy to point people in the right direction if they choose to go that way.
Yeah, the problem on the civil side is when you settle these claims, when a claim comes in, they get settled. 99% of the time, there's a confidentiality clause. So even if they had a beef with a prior employer, and you found out about it and you read the papers in the court or something like that, You can't really find out the other side of the story, the Paul Harvey gig, the rest of the story, because it's covered with a confidentiality and usually a non-disparagement. You see those clauses in pretty much all of the releases that we use in the world of business, and it's protection both ways. I had a pretty hotly contested case last year, the end of last year, and the other side, we settled on everything, and the numbers and the payment structure, everything. And the other side refused to sign the non-disparagement and the non-disclosure clause. And that's what we were part on. So what does that tell you? It tells you that I was going to pay the money and they were going to make a statement in the Boston Globe or something. So all of a sudden I backed off that case. We're not settling this case because that was very important. In the world of business, it's really important if you can get that confidentiality, because if you do settle with someone, they leave, they can go to the, open door or glass door or one of those things, and they can start bad mouthing you. And there's nothing you can do. It's free speech unless you've got the confidentiality clause or the non-disparagement clause in the settlement agreement. So it's a very important aspect of what your lawyer should be looking for, assuming you've got to stroke a check to get rid of somebody. So it's the world I live in, but call me if you've got a question on it. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Brad. Thank you, Denise. Thank you, David. And thank you, our guests, for watching, listening. We will keep you informed of upcoming monthly webinars. We do one a month with experts on a topic of interest to business. We will make sure that you're included in our email rollouts, and we look forward to sharing the little screen with you in the future. Unless anyone has additional questions, I think we're going to sign off. And yeah, go ahead, Denise.
Okay, one final thing. Brad talked about the cheap perks and that go a long way, and just wanted to share a quick reflection. One of my first jobs, I was still in high school. They gave everyone a turkey at Thanksgiving. And I can remember coming home with my school bag on my back and a turkey under my arm on the MBTA. And I was so proud. I remember that to this day. So, the turkey maybe cost them $15, but they still got a bang out of it this late.
Yeah.
Right. Thank yous go a long way. When I had the bad employment situation here the last few weeks, and we had this new lady stepped in and really did a remarkable job. There was never, what time is 6 o'clock? She was here. We bought her a really nice plant the other day with a nice thank you for getting us through this. And it was meant. It's meant, and I think that goes a long way. You're right. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Any other final shout outs? If not,
great holiday, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, everyone, and happy holidays. Absolutely. Thanks for your participation. We'll see you down the road.